most of young kids today will be doing a job that has yet to be invented. If you're agile, if you're resilient, if you're curious, if you're optimistic, like I mentioned, and you kind of are able to zigzag. So, a lot of people could say, you should, in an entrepreneurship, entrepreneurs are good at knowing when to pivot and how to pivot.
Welcome to the Smart Venture Podcast. We're here to bring you the latest and greatest from the Silicon Valley, where unicorns roam and innovation never sleeps. We've got top investors, superstar founders, and well-known tech executives lined up to share their secrets on building and investing in successful companies. Just a quick disclaimer, while we may sound like financial geniuses, but please don't mistake us for your friendly neighborhood financial advisors.
Our sponsor, LD Talent, will transform how you hire, manage, and upskill your tech team. Picture this, chat-based work sessions with proof of work links and Git commits, giving you an exclusive pass to witness the magic happening in your technical projects. No more guessing, see the progress unfold in real time. Their database of 600 plus talent, including full stack developers, UI UX designers, and AI ML experts, is public, searchable, and filterable by over 6,500 skills like React or PyTorch. Not technical, they also offer technical support and project management help. LD Talent is the first to offer detailed vetting without a huge platform cut. With an average rate of $24 per hour and full budget control, Y Combinator companies, teams at Baidu Ventures and Infosys, and Northwestern and Stanford researchers have joined the hundreds hiring on LD. Plug into a diverse community of the smartest minds of Africa and South Asia. Visit ldtalentwork.com or just Google LD Talent to get $100 in free credit and build your product and distributed team quickly, efficiently, and creatively.
So let's get started and dive into the wild world of tech entrepreneurship. Thank you so much for coming on to our show today. To start off the show, I would love to give the audience a little bit background of yours. So you were born and raised in Mexico City and moved to the US when you were 13, and you learned English to survive in California. Education became essential to your career. And later you studied at Stanford as an engineering major, and you fell in love with technology and innovations. And after your MBA at Harvard and various operational roles, you've worked at Norwest Venture Partners as a partner, where you invest in various companies like Udemy, and you were on the board for almost 7 years. And later on, you started your own fund at Roble Ventures and focus on the future of work, learning, and AI. You also teach at Stanford. To start off the show, can you share one lesson that shaped you into who you are today?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's hard to boil it down because it's been so many years. But I would say that one of the things that I had to do early on, as a 13-year-old coming to this country, I think it sort of galvanized my experience a little bit, in that not only did I have to learn the language, but also learn a new culture. I didn't have any exposure to the US before we came to San Diego, first to northern Mexico, from Mexico City, and then to San Diego. And that's where I went to high school and learned English and all of that. But it was learning the culture, which is substantially different. And also with dealing with sort of the immigration, because I had to get a student visa and then a work visa, and then just having to go through that. It was quite a bit of time to get through all of that. I had to kind of learn a lot of different things. So I'd say that the short end of all that, I'd say just remain optimistic that things will work out. And I think that's important in entrepreneurship for sure. And I think another thing that drives me is curiosity. And so in between curiosity, being curious about things, and also just being optimistic, I think it kind of keeps you sort of pushing forward, even though you may face a lot of obstacles. And that, I think that relates to both venture capital as well as entrepreneurship for sure.
For sure. I wonder, because of you and I are both immigrant, there's the good part, which is kind of motivate you to become a better version of yourself, pushing harder. I wonder, like, since you right now you're also a parent and you have 3 kids, and I wonder, like, what does the education part play into their life, and what are things that you would do to, help your kids succeed in terms of like having, motivating them, or helping them become like very driven individuals?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think it's different answer than probably our parents faced or our grandparents faced, just because of the nature of how we're living and where we're living. and just the speed at which we're changing the world, basically. I think that what we're facing now, which our parents didn't face, is an incredibly faster and more volatile world, both geopolitically as well as, the fact that we have technology coming at us in a much faster pace. It's just accelerating. The pace is accelerating, and it's actually creating a lot of differences in the jobs and the things that we need to know by the time we're in high school or in college or in the work world. So when you have such volatility, I tell my students and my kids as well that there's incredible amounts of stats out there that show that or say that most of young kids today will be doing a job that has yet to be invented in society. And that was not the case for our grandparents or our parents, because they kind of knew what vocation to go after roughly, and things were moving not as quickly as they are today. So they could kind of train for that vocation and be a little bit more limited in what we need to have today, which is really an ability to be what I call have an entrepreneurial mindset. Whether you start a company ever or not, this mindset to me is very critical, because it is the ability to deal with the fluctuations in your environment, the volatility in your environment. That's exactly what we're facing today. So it's survival of the fittest. If you're agile, if you're resilient, if you're curious, if you're optimistic, like I mentioned, and you kind of are able to zigzag. So, a lot of people could say, you should, in an entrepreneurship, entrepreneurs are good at knowing when to pivot and how to pivot. But that's not just for entrepreneurs. And the entrepreneurial mindset that you should learn early on in your life is also how to pivot in your career and your skills that you need to learn, and your attitude. And that requires a lot of the things that entrepreneurs have: like I said, resilience and sort of agility and ability to kind of take in your environment and react to it and just pivot, and sort of change. You're most likely going to be changing careers multiple times, not just jobs, but careers. And so I think that's going to be pretty critical. So I tell a lot of people early on, the Stanford class that I teach is all about that. It's a very practical class that sort of helps people get inside the entrepreneurial mindset. I teach my kids that, and obviously at Roble and the portfolio companies that I work with, some of the things that we discuss at the board level, as well as in one-on-ones with the CEOs, is how do you create a team that's resilient, that has that agility, that ability to kind of move in different directions depending on what you're facing and the obstacles that you're inevitably going to face as an entrepreneur, right?
I really love what you said about having the agility and being able to pivot on the right time is really important. I wonder, going back to your venture career, you built your track record at Norwest. During that time, how did you find your own mentor in the space, since it's such a mentorship driven business? Previously, you gave a talk to university students. You, and I believe it was the managing director of PayPal Ventures. Basically, you guys were mentioning don't count on the mentor. How do you figure out how to succeed in the industry, since we're both immigrants, and how do you build up the network in the space to help you succeed?
Yeah, I think that both before I was a venture investor, I was an operator, entrepreneur in a variety of companies, both big and a company I started as well, and some startups. I think in both cases, I think that I haven't had one specific mentor. The way I think I've had a multitude of mentors, depending on sort of where my gaps are in where I need to go and what I need to learn. So I'll give you a few examples. When I first started my career in venture, the one thing that there's not enough of is board governance, board training, how to become a great board member. And I learned that from other board members that had done it in successful companies. Two that I mentioned is the CEO of Citrix, Mark Templeton, was on our board at Adaptive. He's a fantastic CEO, as well as a fantastic mentor and fantastic board member. The CEO himself, Tom Bogan, has a lot of experience in boards. And I just learned through osmosis on how to be a good board member. I was by then, I had learned how to be an investor, I think. I was working on some good exits, including Adaptive and Udemy. But I think that the one thing that doesn't get taught as much is board governance and board work. And so I needed those mentors, and sort of I relied on great board members to kind of helped me learn that, because it's a learned skill too. It's a lot of listening, a lot of really understanding the business, being very prepared, and being very thoughtful about how to advise the company, not just for the shareholders' sake, but for all stakeholders, because you're, as a board member, you're representing all stakeholders, which include the employees, include the shareholders. It includes even the community, because you want to kind of do good and as well as do well. And the board has a lot of power to do that, to shift where you focus, as we've seen sort of recently in some of the things that have happened in terms of board governance. I think that underlines the fact that boards are so important. So that's one example of how I've seek mentorship and in sort of board work, which is now one of the most important things that we do in Roble, is to establish a very, very well-functioning board that has the diverse set of opinions around the table, that has the right chemistry, that has the right accountability and debate, to avoid any kind of groupthink that tends to happen when you put a very similar people in a room that all sort of tend to agree with each other, which tends to happen a lot in venture-led boards for just the mere nature of how they get built, right? So that's just one example that we're very focused on at Roble, and not many people do focus on that, because I think the financing is kind of the most important thing that people do. But with the financing, oftentimes you get a board member. You should think about how to construct that board, much like you do a product roadmap. You should have a board composition roadmap, and there's some things that you could do to make it even more optimized, right?
I love that. You have started Roble Ventures. Before you start, who do you bounce off ideas with? For all the funds, they also have a board, the LP advisory committee. How do you shape that? Who would you pick to, help you in terms of like managing a successful fund?
Yeah, I think that when I first started the fund, or started thinking about the fund, which was a few years ago, and I started raising it in earnest 2 years ago, I really relied a lot on other emerging managers, because I realized that I had been in a fund that was very established, had long history. And so the thing that I did not know, I had been an entrepreneur on the operating side, but had not been an entrepreneur on the fund side as a VC. And so the mentors that I needed there were others that had started their own funds that had been successful. So I relied a lot on emerging managers that had raised their own fund, either after spinning out of another bigger fund, or just coming off of being an operator or entrepreneur. So a lot of those became investors in my fund as individuals. So they not only had a vested interest because of participating in my fund as a limited partner, but also as a friend and somebody that I respect a ton. And so there's a few of those that I really respect. Mark Hershenson at Pear has done an amazing
A
job.
past guest, by the way. Yeah, she
Yes,
was also a guest. Yeah.
she and I sat on a board together, and
Mhm.
and she's been very helpful. Also, really think through how to improve the representation of all types of people in venture, right? So I think another investor as well is James Currier. He's done an amazing job, and a very provocative, thoughtful thought leader in the various areas that he focuses on at NFX. And he's done a really good job. I've known him even before starting NFX. So I think he's great, and he's been a true entrepreneur on both sides. So those two come to mind, and there's a handful of others that I respect and hope to work closely with as we continue onto further funds, right?
Totally. I feel like, you made it sounds like very easy as like, you bounce off ideas with some friends, but like I feel like fundraising or overall starting a fund is like extremely hard. So I wonder like how do you figure out your investing niche when you're starting your own venture? I know that you were focusing on, the education space as you've sitting on the board of Udemy for over 6 years. But when you were starting your own fund, you guys are also focusing on the future of work and AI. And like I wonder, like when you first created fund, how do you determine the structure of your fund in terms of the size, the focus, the investment stage, and what are things that influence your decisions in your investment thesis and focus sectors?
Yeah, there's a couple of things there. One thing, there's a few things that are most important when I started my fund. One is one is really looking in the mirror and saying, does the world need another venture fund? We have way too many out there, right? So am I going to bring something truly differentiated and additive? And I believe I do, and we do, because of various reasons. The fact that, I mentioned the fact that not many angel or micro VCs have the longevity and board experience kind of brings something special to the table, so that you don't have debacles on boards like we've seen recently. So that having that experience is important. Having a different perspective, coming from a country that is not well represented in VC, in a region and a set of people that are not represented in VC and entrepreneurship yet. That population is increasingly more representative in the US, right? And it has a lot of purchasing power. That's another differentiator. So, you go through your differentiating points. The other part is thematically, I had spent a lot of time on future of work, work productivity, SaaS software that allows for better working environments. And that led us to have a good exit with Adaptive. On the future of learning side, we had some good exits, Udemy, and later on as a personal investor in Kahoot. Both of those became multi-billion-dollar outcomes. I think, to me, both of those represent both future work and how we define it, and future of learning, how we define it, which is mostly about the interjection between work environments and learning, because we feel that the world of work is changing so rapidly that you need to upskill and reskill. So it's not about K through 12 or higher ed. It's really a lot about practical sort of training that allows you to kind of improve your socioeconomic status. That's why we call it human enablement technologies. That theme came together because, I realized that there's just so much more to be done. It's contrarian in many ways, because a lot of people don't think that you can make a lot of returns out of those sectors, perhaps. That also happened to us in 2013 when we first made an investment in Udemy. We thought that there was a white space around the adult education space, and there needed to be formal training, and there was nothing out there. So I think having that prepared mind, that thematic approach where you really do create product roadmaps that tell entrepreneurs what's going to happen, hopefully broad brush, 5 years out, 10 years out, having those roadmaps and sort of thinking through those, and then being surprised, but at least you have a point of view on what you think the next 5 years to 10 years are going to bring in each of the sub themes that we have under human enablement. That to me is so important, because being thematic and being focused allows us to go really deep into a subject. And when we meet an entrepreneur, we can sort of help them be much more relevant and be much more helpful to them, because we kind of spend 100% of our time in the theme itself. We don't sort of diverge from the theme, right?
Totally. Speaking of the theme, so what does a future of work look like for you? So, there's many segments can belong to the future of work sector. There's communication, collaboration, there's virtual events, there's hiring and employment, there's knowledge management, there's productivity tools, there's like many subsectors. I wonder, talking about the theme of enablement, and like when you're thinking about the future of work and the future of learning, what does the mental roadmap look like for you? And then in terms of like in the next 5 years, what are things that you're passionate about that you feel like would drive a really great outcome in terms of investments?
Yeah, I think in the future of work, and I know it's a term that's very loaded, but it's kind of a shorthand for a lot of people. For us, the future of work really, especially with AI coming, we take a view that humanity wins, and we're an optimist around what's going to happen with AI. We just need to understand from our Econ 101 days that we have to really understand division of labor basics mean that there's an entity, in this case an AI, but it could be a person, it could be something else that knows how to do certain things better than us. And so we need to understand our comparative advantage versus that AI, and understand over the next 5 to 10 years where those capabilities are going to go versus our capabilities. What I spend a lot of time on is how to think about workflow software, application layer software, and data in data companies too, because proprietary data is going to be the fuel for anything AI. We spend a lot of time thinking through that division of labor and really thinking through how we enable those humans to divide that labor in the best possible way so that they thrive. They can do more with less. They can delegate to that entity that knows how to do things better. So a great example, well, that's kind of maybe close to all of us parents, and I talk a lot about it at Stanford as well. If you think about what a teacher, the day of the life of the teacher in any environment, it could be adult education all the way down. And to me, putting stuff in your brain helps you upskill and reskill, and that relates to a better job, right? So that's why it's in the theme. You think of the job of the teacher and you kind of dissect it into all the functions. The teacher spends the majority of their time doing stuff that an AI could do better, that is very rote or very tactical. So grading papers, creating homework assignments, creating spending time on the lecture itself. We know that a lot of those things can be outsourced because there's, Kana showed us that he's probably one of the best lecturers out there. Well, so why not flip the classroom and have the lecturer be somebody that's very entertaining and engaging? Or, the AI can actually grade papers and create the right homework assignments for the right kid at the right time based on their specific where they are today. So all of that can be outsourced. What cannot be outsourced is what teachers are best at. And so if you look back on your high school days, you look back, what teachers made a difference in your life and why they made a difference. It's not because they graded your homework better or because they gave a better lecture. Is because they believed in you, they inspired you, they motivated you. Those are things that are very human. They empathize sometimes, right? You had that day, so they understand that they kind of need to bring something else, some different emotion to the table. And so it's no different than nurses, by the way, or even parents. The activity that's most valued is the activity that AI cannot yet do. Maybe some argue that in 5 and 10 or 15 years, computers and AI will allow you to sort of be empathetic and bring those emotions. But I would argue that having that connection, that personal connection, and having somebody tell you, hey, I believe in you, you can do it, whether you're sick or you're just studying something, a nurse or a teacher, that capability is going to be available for the teachers because a lot of their work, their menial work or their sort of day-to-day tactical work is going to be relieved, and they can spend a lot more time one-on-one. They can spend a lot of time too with the parents, and so their job becomes a lot more empowered by the ability for them to divide the labor. And that doesn't mean that they're out of a job. In fact, their job just gets reshaped into something that allows for more kids to say, man, I had such a great high school experience or whatever, grammar school experience because my teachers were great. They spent so much personal time with me. They believed in me. They helped me with things I struggled with, be it personal or academic. So I think that's just one example, but that cuts across in every function of society. So we're spending a lot of time really thinking of this sort of division of labor and how it should really be divided based on capabilities and comparative advantage, right?
Totally. I feel like there is a lot to unpack there. So, one thing you mentioned about the division of labor. So, from the example that you're given, it's, the teachers were, instead of teaching a particular subject right now, maybe ChatGPT or like other technology can help students to kind of like learn, but like there's still like the encouragement and then some personalization and like some sort of like human element would be more important in the teaching arena. So I wonder, like, in terms of, I really like that observation. And you mentioned about the division of labor. I wonder, what is your thinking framework in terms of building a good portfolio based on this thesis, the new division of labor? And how do you kind of, since like as an investor, you have to source, analyzing, and then getting into the deal, and then, helping the company to grow and then eventually exit. What is your thinking framework in terms of, sourcing differently or, analyzing in a different way? Like, so what are things that you would do differently based on this vision of yours to
Yeah.
invest?
And I wanted to touch on your prior question around how I thought about the fund. I think one thing I didn't mention is portfolio construction is so important. I mentioned a
Mm.
lot about differentiation. but portfolio construction needs to be well thought out. And so one thing that has worked well for me personally is to really have a high conviction portfolio where I get good ownership coming in, and then I pro rata into further rounds, so that at the end, we're going to end up with 15, 20 companies. There's probably going to be 2 or 3 that are going to more than return multiple times the fund, which is what happened in the last 12, 14 years. In this time, it's going to be no different, that, there's going to be 2 or 3 that really have the outsize, move the needle in an outsized way for the fund to be a very successful fund. And for that, you need to have the proper ownership, the proper portfolio construction. You have to be in those deals. And so you have to make sure that your theme is in big markets with big opportunities at the right time. And we think that is all the case. In fact, when we started our human enablement movement sort of 2 years ago, we didn't have the knowledge that generative AI was going to kind of change the world. And in fact, now the debate on human enablement, has gone completely insane, because it is the right debate, to think about how something as powerful as generative AI could actually displace us or enhance us, enable us, right? So to us, we're in the right theme. We have the right portfolio construction, which is high conviction. The sourcing is also something that I've realized over time. In order to source properly and get in front of all the right deals, you need to have a very prepared mind, number one. So have the thematic roadmaps well laid out and understand where the neighborhoods you want to be in are. You understand there's a neighborhood. You don't know the house yet, but you're going to buy a house. You just don't know which one it is. And so you then make sure that you see all the houses in the neighborhood. And so for that, you need to require a very tech-enabled back office that encompasses not only are the most cutting-edge CRM systems in funnel, it almost like an enterprise sales model where you are outbound, inbound. You are actually doing stuff like this to make sure that people know what you do and they can refer you to deals. More importantly, you treat people the right way. We're not just human enablement because of where we invest, but we also are human enablement because of the way we treat our entrepreneurs. We enable our own entrepreneurs and our own employees. So I think it's very important to get back to the entrepreneur very quickly. Speed matters. So for us, we have a always on approach where we try to get back to every single entrepreneur no more than within 7 days, 5 days, working days. But more importantly, we give you a very quick answer. We don't have to have a long discussion. And that's been appreciated because I think speed is super important. And when you're thematic and you're focused, you know what you're looking for. And because you have a pattern recognition already, as long as your blind spots and sort of they don't get in the way, I think you've got to be very introspective to make sure that your patterns are correct and that you kind of reanalyze your patterns. But once you do that, you are able to make decisions quickly without shortcutting any diligence, because that's another thing is you have to be very disciplined to make sure that you diligence properly and document properly so that you don't make any foolish mistakes, right?
Totally. In terms of diligence, why don't we use some of your portfolio as an example? Maybe we could use, a Tiny Comet, which is like building educational games on Roblox, and then or like Hyperbond, which is AI adapted sales and marketing emails without like any human reviews, like or like any other your portfolio. So like what about can you walk us through like how you fund them throughout your thesis? Like how do you see the market and then why did you pick that company?
Yeah, no, those are great examples. Those are recent investments. So they're still early in their development. They're seed investments. But they're fantastic. First and foremost, we at that stage, both of them are pre-product market fit. So they're very early pre-seeds. Part of our Roble Lab strategy, where we invest 200 to 500,000 on pre-product market fit. And then we come in with a much bigger check on the post-seed once the product market fit has been figured out with the ICPs or the early adopters, and then we help them with the go-to-market. So in the case of Tiny Comet, I think Anka and Emily impressed us incredibly on their ability to know how to develop a game. So that Andreessen Horowitz was part of our co-investment duo, and Andrew Chan there knows the space cold in terms of gaming. In our case, we know that if you're going to build an educational game, you want to make it very exciting for the kids. And so, the gaming expertise was very important. However, you also need the pedagogy that's going to enable these games to be played and to be adopted in certain settings that are more educational settings. So we know that environment because our product roadmap in that part of education is that we have the sub theme that we call the death of textbooks or gamification of education, which means that instead of having a textbook that just kind of you have to read, which caters to the visual learner and caters to a very sort of calm learner. But if you have any kind of ADHD or you learn in different ways, kinesthetically or audio, then this traditional way to learn has very alienated a lot of people. And so when we look at those who get alienated, those are people that are very creative thinkers. In fact, in Silicon Valley, you have 35%, I think there's a study out there that 35% of entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley are dyslexic. They have had to learn how to be creative in different ways, how to create crutches. So those are incredible human assets that we're alienating by actually teaching them in a way that is not very conducive. They have to muster a lot of self-confidence for them to become the Charles Schwabs or Richard Bransons of the world, which happen to be dyslexic entrepreneurs that are incredible leaders, right? So to us, the gamification of education was a theme. It makes sense. It unleashes a lot of potential in society because of all that thing that I described. So we had a prepared roadmap. That's what led us to Kahoot, by the way, which was a big success. And we've done a couple more investments in that theme as well. So when Anka and Emily came to us, they were the right founders, right co-investors with Andreessen and Horowitz. And what we did is essentially brought the educational part to bear here. And now they're off and running on an amazing game that is all based on learning history initially. So to us, it's still early days, but it's a great way to get in front of a deal. And the good news is that they needed that educational and that sort of human enablement expertise that we bring. So it was good partnership. So we sourced it. Our principal, David Paris, sourced it, and he did an amazing job bringing it because it fit into our neighborhood and it was the right house to invest in. And so it was an outbound deal that was kind of educated by our roadmaps, basically. Not unlike Hyperbound, which was also sourced in a very similar way.
I wonder, what is the most profitable subsector in the education category?
I still think that right now, in the last couple of years after the pandemic, I think there's been a lot of excitement around education, but I think there's been also a lot of overinvestment in education. The thing that I'm seeing very disciplined about making sure that I keep track not only of the startups, also is very important to see what the giants are doing. And the giants in this case are going to be the public companies like Coursera and Udemy. To me, that whole ecosystem of learning in the workplace is yet to be, we're sort of in inning one right now because these companies brought great content to bear, but they come without context of anybody's like career aspirations or kind of their real 360 review, which, by the way, that's another thing that we shouldn't be doing. We should be much more proactive about performance management. But once you know the context of that person, you apply technologies like AI and other things, and you bring the content to bear, you're able to kind of upskill and reskill on the fly. To us, that has a long way to go. You create a very agile, back to agility, you create a very agile individual. And most individuals are not going to take on that sort of entrepreneurial task if they're very busy with life, with kids, with work. So you need the corporation to really steer that person. And so the technology can really help to get you to where you want to be in your career and maximize your potential. I think there's a lot of wasted energy in corporate America on making lack of transparency, lack of promotional opportunities, lack of upskilling and reskilling. And so you could create a much more fluid environment, a flatter organization that allows for more mobility if you want it. If you don't want it, that's okay. But whoever wants it should get it. It shouldn't be because you know somebody that promoted you. It should be because of your skills and because of your effort that you get promoted. And unfortunately, that's not happening. Meritocracies are not as prevalent as they should be. Instead, we have a lot of favoritism and nepotism that happens in those corporations. But data can create transparency, and content around learning and development can bring that. So I'm very much in listening to the Udemy's and Coursera's of the world's earnings calls and understanding what they're doing and understanding what the next 5 years, 10 years will bring in those sectors, because there's a lot of opportunity there.
Totally. Speaking of Udemy, you were on their board for over 6 years, almost 7 years. And I wonder throughout, like, being a part of their journey, watching them closely, helping them grow, what were things that you feel like they've done right to make them more successful than many of their competitors? And you also mentioned about Chegg in some other talk you've done before about, like, you missed Chegg, but like, you were still having a lot of respect for the company. They pivot from a company that's just like translating textbook into the internet, or like renting textbook, to whatever it is today. By the way, their COO was on our show. So anyway, so I wonder, like, the entire like education startup ecosystem, what do you see are the common success factor for the company that went really big compared to, some company that we probably never heard of today? You mentioned about you invest in a company that were not working. I wonder, like, what were things that these company like Udemy done right compared to some other company that in the sector that didn't really go really well?
Yeah, it's funny because the question is so related to something I've been working on with Stanford, which is
Mhm.
really a case study that Stanford's writing, and I'm helping a little bit on the case of Udemy from the beginnings
Mhm.
when Aaron Bali and Gagan started the company. And so we went through and interviewed a lot of the protagonists throughout the long journey, because it was a long journey. It's been a long journey, from the prior CEOs to the operating executives that were brought on early to the current CEO. And so the consistent theme is they have something that they mention, because they're kind of the prototypical company that kind of lives their values, so to speak. And so one of the things that really struck me even from day one is that they have a learning culture. So to me, that translated into a growth mindset. And that was exemplified even the beginnings of Udemy, where Aaron himself came from Turkey. He didn't have a visa, struggled to get any kind of funding, had a thick accent. So I really sympathize with that. And he was clearly an underdog. He was not part of the Silicon Valley sort of elite, hadn't gone through all the schools that a lot of entrepreneurs go to. And so to me, the underdog story that he brought in this case, and he's brought to other startups as well that have been very successful, is just amazing. But that kind of permeates throughout the history of the company, that it's a learning culture, it's a growth mindset culture. And I think that's critical, right? And back to my original sort of characteristics of what I think make for a good career or entrepreneur is optimism and curiosity. And I think the Udemy team has it in spades. Has a lot of curiosity, a lot of optimism, a lot of abilities to pivot, create new types of businesses that are now, Udemy Business was created, just in the middle of my tenure. It's been a great success. So I give a lot of credit to folks that created it with that overall vision, overall sort of mindset, to always be learning. So that's everybody that I've worked with over the years there.
Totally. I love that always be learning. And, back in time, I feel like one of the thesis that you were very right about is, people after school, like, people need to consistently like educating themselves instead of just like the learning star after school. So I wonder, like, what does that translate to today as, we are adding the element of AI. So I was listening to a talk by the founder of Khan Academy. So he was highlighting the AI could be a personal assistant to educating students, or helping them, assisting them to become, like, basically AI will become like a more personalized tool for students. And then I also hear from like Professor Ethan Malik from the Wharton School. He has some really cool ways of leveraging AI as a teacher to teach students better. So I wonder, what's your view of, like, what does the continuous learning translate to today's trend with the help of AI?
Yeah, that one thing that I always think about when I think of themes is, I think maybe Reid Hoffman said that in a podcast sometime, but I really like the fact that every time that I look at sort of a broader theme or a roadmap that we're creating, is like I ask myself, does this need to exist? Like, forget about all the detail around it, but should this exist, and does that improve society? And then you kind of put business models on top of it, product capabilities, technology like AI and everything else. You sprinkle all those ingredients, but in general, do you believe this should exist in society? And that's, I think, what led me to think that, hey, why should people be learning from 5 years old to 21 years old? But then you kind of stop learning formally from 21 to 100. Like, why shouldn't be people in a world that has computers downloading software and knowledge and insights consistently, why shouldn't humans be downloading insights and software and whatever is the equivalent for a lifetime? So to me, I think it's super important to ask the questions, should this exist? And so I think that to me is a critical component, almost like first principles. Yeah, first principles of, start there, like, should this thing exist? So
I really like that, like thinking from first principle, like thinking about if the thing should exist. When you're thinking about fundraising, what kind of investor would you think about to approach for your own fund? And what does the trend looks like, compared to 2 years ago when, when you were first raising for Roble?
Yeah, no, I think the number one, if you look at the investors that we have and the ones that we expect to have future funds, I think they all, number one, care about returns. So I start with the fact that, hey, I've been an investor for X number of years and I've returned a certain amount. And I do feel that it is repeating itself in Roble Fund 1, even though it takes time, right? So we already feel like we have a few breakouts that could be fund returners. So we're excited about those. The thing that we are focused on is really putting Fund 1, we obviously human enablement tech. In human enablement tech, we have the ability to be agile and focus on one area versus another. I think in Fund 2, we'll be focusing a lot more on the future of work, which will mean a lot more enterprise software that's application layer that focuses on workflows, focuses on AI. So that should appeal. I mean, there's plenty of examples of multi-billion-dollar companies in that space. And so that should appeal to investors that want to make a great return in a category that's understood, with a manager that has done it before and wants to do it again and is on track to do it again. So I'm hoping that story sort of comes through. On the entrepreneur side, the reason they want to go with us is we have a point of view and we move very quickly. So because they all work together, but because we have a point of view, we can move quickly. And so we also are very customer centric because of our human enablement empathy. We really focus on making sure that every meeting that we have, right after we send a survey to the entrepreneur and ask them, how was your experience with us? 99% of the time we pass on the deal, right? So that you would expect that they'd send us really nasty notes. In reality, we treat them with respect. We work very hard to get back to them quickly. We give them strong feedback on why we were passing, and majority of the time we do, or what our next steps are, and very clearly in what time frame. So that customer-centric mentality where our customers are entrepreneurs, super important, because that then leads into more referrals and more deals for us. So to us, human enablement has a lot to do with treating humans how humans want to be treated, as well as what themes we want to bet on, right?
If you're like top company that Kahoot, you heard about it from your kids, when you were examining these deals, when you're making angel investments, what are something that you look at? Because, I think it's very different than investing through a fund, right? Like, so you have to think about the return, the portfolio construction, but like when you're angel investing, you will be a lot more free. But on the other hand, it's your own money, like fully. And I wonder, like, how do you think about it differently? And then if you're angel investing in the future of workspace, what are, let's say, 3 sector of companies that you would look at as an angel investor?
As an angel investor, yeah, I think that angel investors and emerging managers or seed investors in VCs hopefully shouldn't think about things so differently. maybe if angel investors are investing in friends and family, maybe the relationship with that person matters more to them. But in reality, if your number one priority is to make returns, then you should focus on the same thing. So the diligence is the same, the sourcing should be the same. The check sizes are different because probably angel investors will not have a portfolio construction that demands a certain set of ownership, but in general, it should be similar. So the thing that I'm most focused on is as the team, the founding team. So we mentioned how great the Hyperbound and Tiny Comet teams were, but they've been constantly, of course, you make mistakes because you can't assess everybody. You can't look inside a person's motivation or brain, but we do focus a lot on trying to understand quality of the entrepreneur and whether they have the qualities necessary to kind of succeed under duress and under some, have the resilience necessary to get there. So I think to us, that's the most important. Number two is equally important is the make sure that there's a large market with large margin potential. I think oftentimes people think of sort of market size as top line, but they don't really think about market size as margin line, meaning how much profit is in that sector. And so to us is that encompasses the sort of the margin structure of a potential business, because a lot of times these companies compete against free or against apathy or against some substitute that is not a real competitor. They claim they have no competitors sometimes, but in reality, they may have a lot of substitutes, including the substitute of free. And so that may mean that you have a big potential market, but potentially could be commoditized. That market really, that takes your margins pretty minimally low. So those are the two major areas. We think that the SaaS model, enterprise SaaS model, has the right capabilities around, as long as you have a very retentive sort of workflow solution, perhaps, that is really habitual to the end user in the workplace. Those are the sort of music to our ears, high LTV to CAC, high ability to generate margins because of the leverage of software, very habitual usage. Those are all the things that kind of drive a very high margin business in a very big market with hopefully the right operator. So all of that is look for. And in their sectors, like I said, we're spending a lot of time on the division of labor of AI versus humans. And that cuts across sales, marketing, customer service, other profession, actual industries. In the legal profession, it will be completely revamped, as well as other sectors, right? So there's a lot to do there. And some will be won by the incumbents. So that's another thing. We just put a piece out around David versus Goliath. We need to be really thoughtful that incumbents have a lot more data, right? And that is the fuel for machine learning. So you need to really think whether incumbents are going to win that race, startups, and what makes for a David to actually beat out the Goliath. And it can be based on heft of data, because the incumbents have more of that, most likely. So you have to be very thoughtful, and that's a piece we thought about and put out. So there may be new models out there that come out, and we've seen them in historical terms in Silicon Valley, where pure SaaS may not be the answer in certain cases. Maybe in some cases, managed services would be a better model. So you got to be really thoughtful what model to apply.
So I love that. So I wonder, let's say if I see a company in the future of workspace, what are three things that I should consider before I, let's say, send the deal to you? Let's say if I'm thinking about this is a really great space, and then I saw a company that's coming out of, let's say, like a famous accelerator, and then the founder seems very driven, have founded a couple companies before, may or may not be successful, but like in general, they have some experience under their belt. I wonder, how would you evaluate a company quickly to think if it's matter to you, and what kind of company should people sending you?
Yeah, if it fits in the sort of the application layer software enterprise SaaS world, and it could be consumer or it could be small business as well, but if it fits in that world and it fits into the human enablement theme, especially the future work theme, the number one priority and the only priority for us then is whether that person that's referring it to us thinks incredibly highly of that CEO, that founder. If they think very highly, but it's even in the edges of our theme, we still want to meet that person, because that is the limiting factor. Breakout, exceptional sort of, one in a million type founders don't grow on trees. And so we want to meet all of them, right? And we want to help all of them, even if we don't invest. So I think that to us is the most important thing. We're happy to meet them and happy to, collaborate with them and move very quickly. The answer is very, like I said, we're very of a prepared mindset because of our thematic approach. So if we have a roadmap for what you're bringing to the table, we'll have a very solid conversation because we spend time researching the topic, right? So at the very least, it would be a very good conversation on both directions.
What does exceptional means? Since like, in Silicon Valley, everybody passed like a certain intelligence bar. And I wonder, what are the specific characters that define them as an exceptional founder?
Yeah, it's funny because over the years we've done sort of these persona sort of analyses on what makes for a great entrepreneur. I keep it simple. I think to me is decision making is precise. Is they have this sixth sense. They have a good gut. The way to test that, oftentimes, the thing that I like to do is in a resume you see a lot of words and then a space and a lot of words and then a space. And the space is where you actually had to make a decision because you transition from a lot of words, a job or a school or whatever, to the next thing. Those decisional moments, and there are a lot in your life too that are not in your resume. Those decisional moments test your judgment, test your ability to kind of make decisions that are very life-changing decisions potentially. And you had to kind of figure out how to gather the data, use your gut, use your brain, understand like how to go about that decision and how long it took you to make that decision. So all of those inputs are important for us on decision making. The other is, do you have a history of excelling and wanting to go really deep into something? So it's oftentimes a lot of people have a lot of experiences that kind of are superficial. You don't go really deep into one area. But if you have a T, meaning you've tried a bunch of things and one thing you've gone really deep in, and deeper than most, you hit hard rock, you kind of hunker down and kind of drill to make sure you get through that hard rock to go deeper. To us, that obsession is so important because that's what you're going to have to do to bring something dramatically different to the market. So those are just two examples, the T concept as well as the judgment.
Totally. Okay, we're at the last 1 minute fire round for you. So number one question is, who would you invite to your dinner party?
Are they alive or?
It's your party, so.
My party. I would love to have it. I mean, I'm always fascinated by Einstein's thinking. I'm not a physics guy. I don't understand it, but I would love to spend time, him explaining it to me. That would have been fun.
That would be fun. Who made the biggest impact in your career?
My dad.
What's your favorite book?
The Next 100 Years by Friedman.
What's your information diet look like?
Information diet. Omnivore. I love thoughtful analysis. A lot of what the investment bank research firms put out is super interesting to me right now because of debates of AI, Silicon Valley. So I start with that.
Where can we find you outside of work?
Playing golf.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sergio, for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Grace. I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody.
Thanks for tuning into Smart Venture Podcast. If you learned something from the episode or even just mildly tolerated me, please subscribe and leave a 5-star rating. I promise I will keep bringing you more successful, insightful interviews and insider tips about startups. Remember, sharing is caring. So tell your friends to listen too, or enemies, I won't judge. Until next time, keep venturing smartly.